talking about the High Elves today, and the High Elves are... when you read the army book for the High Elves,
yeah.
it says the history of the High Elves is the history of the whole world,
Yep.
which is quite a big claim.
I think that's pretty much the High Elves. Not necessarily that they are the world, but pretty big claims.
That they think they are.
Yeah,
yeah.
they're elves. All elves are like that, really. But
none more so than the High Elves.
No, they definitely see themselves as the protectors of the whole world, even if these days they've been reduced to just being on Ulthuan, this island in the middle of the ocean.
So if you've been following our blog, you can check out the High Elf roster that we revealed. We also did a live stream about it. We've got a little excerpt from the High Elf army book that tells you a little bit of information about them. Gives you a flavour before we start talking, so I'm just going to read that out for you now. There are few sights more glorious than an army of High Elves. Serried ranks of white-garbed soldiers take to the field alongside proud knights, mighty mages, and ancient creatures of legend. The High Elves are an elite force who, warrior for warrior, can outmatch almost any other race in the Warhammer world. Over the long millennia of their existence, they have mastered every style of fighting. Whether you seek phalanxes of spears, unstoppable cavalrymen, dead-eyed archers, or peerless charioteers, you will find them here. I mean, I feel like a High Elf wrote the High Elf rulebook. I know that doesn't make any sense.
I don't think they'd let anyone else write their little book, that's for sure. But it's not far off. I mean, Ulthuan is a pretty varied place, with lots of different little sort of like mini kingdoms around, and they all bring their own sort of flavour and strength to a High Elf army. It's
almost similar to Bretonnia in that way. Like you've got the duchies in Bretonnia who make up that kingdom as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a similar thing with High Elves. There's a lot of political intrigue when it comes to
some of the more
dealing.
The most interesting stuff with the High Elves is how they are. It's kind of like it's pretty House of Cardsy. They're sort of all like always plotting and a lot of intrigue, as you say, and sort of political manoeuvring going on under the surface, but they all pretend that they're all. Well, I mean, they are really all for the High Elves, but within that, they do want to see their particular faction.
It's kind of like that guy who turns up to a football match and it's like, yeah, I'm part of this team, but I want the Man of the Match award myself.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. Yeah, a bad player.
Yeah,
but somehow it works. Yeah, then that's pretty much the High Elves, I would say.
So when playing as the High Elves in Total War Warhammer 2, you will have access from the get-go. There probably will be other legendary lords added on, but from the get-go you will have access to 2 legendary lords, and they are arguably the most famous characters in all of High Elf history.
Tyrion and Teclis?
Tyrion and Teclis.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of famous figures in High Elf history, but Tyrion and Teclis, these twins, this pair, are currently probably the 2 greatest High Elves alive.
Well, they are sort of like the poster boys almost. When you talk about High Elves, you think immediately of Tyrion and Teclis.
Yeah, you do.
So they were born as twins, and they were the sons of the current Phoenix King?
Yes, but they have their line traces all the way back to Anarion, they say. And Tyrion and Teclis, although twins, couldn't be a whole lot different if you tried. They're pretty chalk and cheese.
Yeah, so you've got Tyrion, who's this like strong warrior who's all about physical battle, mastering his melee capabilities, and doesn't bother too much about the political side.
He's not so good at it, no.
Yeah,
but they do say there's no greater warrior in all of Ulthuan than Tyrion.
Exactly, and then you've got his twin, who is Teclis.
Yep.
Actually, the first person we see in the announced trailer for Warhammer 2, with the moon crest on his helmet. He's actually incredibly weak. The only reason he's still alive is through these magical potions that he drinks every day. But there is no greater user of magic.
No, they say that the Teclis is perhaps stronger even than Nagash himself. Although obviously he's never had the chance to test that out. But they say that there's no one greater or more powerful than magic in the whole wide world.
So do you want to fill us in on some of the background of these 2 characters?
Of Tyrion and Teclis? Well, they like to say Tyrion, they say, is Anarion reborn himself because he's that great and that mighty and that powerful in combat. But he wouldn't think that he was stronger than his brother, for instance, because it's entirely possible that the Teclis would be able to just sort of incinerate him beat him an eye. But together they've fought many battles. In Teclis' past, for instance, he brought magic to the Empire, to the realm of men. He helped set up the colleges of magic by just giving them just an inkling of the of the true magic that he was able to command. And he's sort of more. He sort of likes to learn and to go out and explore, whereas Tyrion is all about staying in Ulthuan and fighting back evil and preventing chaos wherever he can. And like you said, he's got no head for the politics. So it's sort of brute strength that keeps him going and keeps him sort of in good standing with everybody else. Whereas,
but it's not just brute strength; it's bravery as well.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
he is that sort of like ideal leader that you'd want on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Especially for those. I mean, if you're coming at this from a total war perspective, you want a strong leader who's able to take on any foe that comes his way. And if you're playing as a high elf, you need Tyrion on your side.
Tyrion goes on the front line, and Tyrion goes
Exactly.
into battle, and that's how it is. And Teclis stays back a little bit and blows people to pieces.
Smashes them to smithereens
Absolutely.
with comets of Casadora.
Exactly, and then things even worse maybe.
Yeah. So we touched on it earlier. Tyrion is trying to defend the Isle of Ulthuan, and Ulthuan is in a bit of a precarious place at the moment.
Yeah. Ulthuan sort of sits alone in the middle of the ocean, and in the middle of Ulthuan, I don't know whether everyone knows what Ulthuan looks like, but it's like it's a ring, like a ringed island, and in the middle is a small little island called the Isle of the Dead, and on the Isle of the Dead is the Great Vortex itself, maintained by the High Elves, and essentially holding the world together, which is not as safe as it sounds. It probably doesn't sound very safe, because the Great Vortex was set up to stop chaos when chaos first came down, or to stop it getting worse. And then, during the Sundering, it was nearly destroyed by Malekith, who is just a nasty man. He wanted to, if he couldn't be king, he wanted to destroy the entire world.
Yeah.
So he tried to destabilize the vortex.
Proper threw his toys out the pram.
Yeah, exactly. It's table flip 101. If I can't have this, nobody can. And so that's essentially Ulthuan. So defending Ulthuan is defending the world, and that's how the High Elves see it, as protectors of the entire world.
So Ulthuan sits in this, like you said, this central place in the world. You've got the old world where we started into Warhammer 1.
Yep. It's off to
We're
the east.
moving into the new world,
Yep.
which is off to the west. So
Yep.
obviously it's modelled after the world that we live in.
Yeah.
So you've got Europe and the Americas on the western front. We've also got the Southlands here. So Ulthuan sits in this sort of nest where I suppose the Pacific Ocean would be in the real world. And it's kind of modelled after the sort of like Atlantis kind of idea. The isle is sinking around you and they're trying to prop it up with magic.
To do with the Sundering and stuff, and then chaos magic everywhere. It's just sort of dragging it down, and the spell is being woven in the center of Ulthuan and the Isle of the Dead is sort of keeping it all together. But we don't know for how long that will last. They very much say that the High Elves are in their twilight.
Yeah.
But they still they don't want to believe that, and they won't believe that, and they'll keep trying to stick around because they think it's their duty.
They're almost like this fallen empire that refuses to fall the final hurdle.
But they have fallen so far. They used to be all over the world.
Yeah.
They helped shape it, according to them. If you believe them, then they essentially had a hand in everything. And now this is what's left of them.
And they are, I mean, they've had such a incredible history, and they've shown such strength and political might, and their military tactics are so fine-tuned, but at the end it's kind of hubris which has been their downfall, which it always is with those kind of empires.
Yeah, like everything in the Warhammer world, they're tainted by chaos. So they used to be super noble, super generous and ambivalent, and then that sort of twisted a little bit to its darker side by chaos being everywhere. Now they're, like you say, they're hubristic, they're arrogant, they're overconfident, overzealous, and then that started to lead, like it has every race in the Warhammer world, to their downfall. So, oops.
So, the birth of the High Elves came with Anarion,
Yes.
the Defender, first of his name.
Be careful.
There's a lot of reused names in High Elf lore.
Yeah, they all.
It kind of comes from honouring tradition.
Yeah.
The High Elves are all about tradition, and they're very set in their ways and don't like things to change.
No.
So you have to look back right at the start of the history to find out why the High Elves are like they are. So can you tell us a bit more about Anarion?
About Anarion? Well, the first Phoenix King, and he came from relatively humble backgrounds. He wasn't super duper. He wasn't noble. He was a wanderer, and he came back to Ulthuan, to the High Elves when when the land was riven by madness and by battle and by civil war and strife and that kind of thing. And he traveled to the shrine of Asurion, where the flames of Asurion are, and he begged the god to save his people. And then he offered himself as sacrifice and threw himself into the flames of Asurion. But rather than being sacrificed, he wasn't harmed by the flames, and he came out the other side, transformed into the first Phoenix King. And from that point on, he struck out, unified the High Elves and sort of unified Ulthuan and turned the High Elves into the power that they sort of rose and rose and rose from that point. And so every Phoenix King has to go through the same ritual to be decided worthy of ruling them.
It's quite interesting because the Phoenixes are a big part of the sort of like the culture behind how the High Elves work, and you almost see with Anarion, he came in when the High Elves were at their weakest again, and made this rebirth following the same path that he did. He went into the flames, came out of the ashes a new man, or a new elf rather, and as did the civilization that he then led.
Yeah,
so
essentially the whole thing was like a phoenix.
Yeah, the phoenix is like a metaphor for how the High Elves work.
Is that why they call it the Phoenix King?
Maybe. And it's kind of happening now as well in the time period in which Warhammer Fantasy Battles and Warhammer Fantasy 2, Warhammer Fantasy 2? Total War Warhammer 2 plays out in, because at this time, as we said, chaos has tinged their perfect society, and this utopia has started to crack and to unfold. Ulthuan is on the verge of sinking, only propped up by magic. You've got the Vortex is in an unstable position, which is the sort of center of this whole campaign. And they're looking, if you take on their leadership, playing as Tyrion or Teclis, they're looking for you to bring them back into the big empire sprawling the world that they used to be.
Yeah, it's certainly not impossible in the game. But the way you approach it is definitely different. Like Tyrion is conquest, bravery, defense. He could strike out from Ulthuan to sort of rebuild the empire, defeat your enemies, defeat the Dark Hills, spread out to your land, maybe reforge your bond with the dwarves, who knows. Whereas Teclis is much more about, yeah, sure, he'll bring the thunder if he needs to, but he's a lot more considered, a lot more thoughtful, a lot more knowledgeable. Like he wants to forge bonds and hopefully save the world together, whilst also thinking the High Elves should be the ones that lead that through.
He's always looking at the big picture, thinking, well, obviously we're going to win this battle, what happens afterwards?
Yeah, Teclis is the strategist and Tyrion is the tactician, I would say.
And they work together so well because of that.
Yeah.
But with this sort of unique way that we play in Total War, you can pit them against each other. Obviously, from a perspective, I wouldn't recommend it either. From a perspective of the High Elf lore, obviously, I don't think there's any point in which they've fought against each other.
Tyrion and Teclis? No. I don't think Tyrion's that stupid.
But in Total War, if you want to make that happen,
you want to be that stupid.
Yeah, if you want to be the stupid guy, you have that freedom, which is the cool thing about playing Total War.
Yeah, I mean, it can all go really well for you, or it can just fold in on
Diminish.
itself. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about Phoenix. We've actually got one of the models. So this was painted by not my boss, but my boss's boss. So we should really be careful with this.
I'm not touching it.
Well, I wanted you to pick it up, so I'm afraid.
Oh God, really?
You're going to have
I'm
to.
up. All right.
So this is a
Frostheart Phoenix.
A Frostheart Phoenix. So
wobbly.
So there's two Phoenixes that we've revealed in the roster.
Yeah.
There's the Frostheart Phoenix, and there's also the Flamespire Phoenix. So what's the difference between the two?
Plot twist, it's the same Phoenix, in a way. A Frostheart Phoenix is a very old Phoenix. They start off as Flamespire Phoenixes, young and on fire and fiery and that kind of thing. And as they get older, their heat sort of ebbs away from them, and they grow colder and they start drawing in heat from the area around them. So they sort of become these little beacons of cold, make everything cold around them. And when they get to this age, they look for a way to end their lives in glory. And so they're much better to be as mounts. So like High Elves can ride them a lot more easily. I imagine you probably burn yourself if you tried to sit on the other one. And they look for glory and to end their lives in battle. Otherwise, they just freeze solid and turn completely into ice and sort of look like little sort of gargoyles and monuments around Ulthuan, just kind of frozen solid. So yeah, they're the same but different, and in game they're different, obviously. This is a mounted thing. I like these ones better, honestly. I think a lot of people disagree with me, but I preferred the
I love the colour scheme on this one.
I know.
And I'm not sure if that's the official colour scheme. Obviously, this has been painted by one of the staff here at CA, so it could be anything. We've also got a couple of other models here. We've got an Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower.
We have. Which isn't as cool as a Phoenix.
Not quite as cool as a Phoenix, but still cool. Still cool. So we touched on these a bit in the roster reveal. Yeah. Obviously, we had the models with us at that point as well. So these guys are one of your basic siege weapons that you can get in the game. They have a functionality where you can either shoot each bolt individually, or you can shoot every single bolt that you've got loaded in one big go.
Big scatter shot.
Yeah, so if you've got like, say you've got like a chaos giant coming at you, you shove every single spear you can into him, all in one big shot.
That sounds more like my strategy than the other method. Yeah, these dudes used to be exclusively on ships. They were used by the Lothian Sea Guard. They just put them all on their ships, sent them out to sea, and just destroy their enemies with them. But they've started using them more on land now. The Lothian Sea Guard are very, very, very good at using these. Yeah. And they pack a hell of a punch, as you wouldn't want to see that coming at you.
No, not at all. No. Not at all. No. And I mean, if you look at the Lizardmen trailer, you can see a skink riding a pterodon just evade about 12 bolts coming at him, which is a very cool moment. We've also got some beautiful cavalry, which are, I think they're called Illyrian Reavers.
Illyrian Reavers, yeah. I'm not so hot on these dudes, but they look amazing.
They do look very cool. And they've got these, I mean, Rob's gone for kind of like a bluish tone.
He's gone for a sort of cobalt look for all of them, hasn't he? Yeah.
It's quite pretty, but you do have these sort of like, you do have this like resplendent sort of like white mounts.
Oh, it's very high elf.
Yeah,
like
very
look at it, like big plumed hats. Even the horses got a plume. Everything is sort of resplendent. Maybe it's because Rob painted it really well. But yeah, like the tassels, the tassets, the horse cloak. I don't know what you'd call it, but
horse armor.
Yeah,
DLC coming soon.
Don't throw shade. The horse, the horse is almost more resplendent than the rider. So it's very.
Don't tell the rider that though.
No, I won't. I won't tell the horse.
You'd be very upset.
Horse will be so full of himself.
So we obviously have massive array of different units that we can have.
Yeah, the High Elf roster is super varied.
So we should talk about the kind of tactics that the High Elves use in battle. So we see in the announced trailer, you've got that sort of phalanx that gets formed. Spearmen are kind of like the core of your army.
Yeah.
If you've played Wood Elves, you're probably quite used to that.
They
with
often
the
say
Guard.
about the High Elves, like you talk like all of these awesome sort of elite units, like your dragons and your phoenixes and your reavers and your bolt throwers, and all these guys are out for their glory, and they're really powerful units. But you can't forget the core is sort of the citizenry, like the spearmen, the archers. They form the, like for any army, they form the bulk of your force, and without them, you ain't going nowhere.
Absolutely, and we see so many magical creatures come in with them as well. We've also got the beautiful dragons that come across with the phoenixes, and the dragons are incredible. Yes. We've touched a little bit about a few new features that we've added to dragons to make them a bit more interesting in Warhammer 2. So we do have these breath attacks that come with the dragons that I think were in the tabletop as well.
Swooping
these dragons can sort of fly above the battleground and almost like a massive flying siege weapon just unleash these like flame and frost attacks.
Cool.
It looks incredibly cool. So talk to me about dragons.
Oh man, the sentence I've always wanted someone to say to me. Talk about dragons. There are 3 types of dragons in Warhammer. It's the High Elf world, and again, much like the Phoenixes, same dragon, but the youngest dragons, we check the names because I get them in the wrong order all the time. Your sun dragons are your youngest. That's right, your sun dragons, and they're young. They're impetuous. They flap around. They cause havoc. They're very, very powerful. But as they get older, they get stronger. And then so your wiser, your older and wise ones are your moon dragons, and they're a little less impetuous than the younger dragons. And then but they're very powerful. And then when you get to the oldest sort of ancient, and we're talking ancient, like most High Elves don't even, they were old when the High Elves were young. There's your Star Dragons. And they say they're so powerful that they can take on like the greater demons of chaos and win. And that's a pretty gnarly feat.
Yeah, I mean that's a big claim to make, which, as we've seen with the High Elves, is kind of coming out of the
even for the High Elves, that's pretty big.
Yeah. It's pretty big.
Maybe you'll see that happen.
Maybe. Who knows? You'll have to buy Warhammer 2 and find out. So if we're going to talk about magic, we have to talk about the Vortex.
We do.
And central to this Vortex is the Great Ritual.
Yes.
So you actually get a glimpse of the Great Ritual in our announced trailer. You see Teclis touch the stone of the Geomantic Web and is seeing this vision on the Isle of the Dead of Calador forming this great vortex. So Calador, incredibly important figure in High Elf history.
Yeah, Calador Dragon Tamer, as they call him. Very old friend of actual Anarian himself. It was him that declared Anarian first Phoenix King, chosen of Asurian. And it was him, it's Calador, who's sort of instrumental in holding back chaos when it sort of came pouring through the rifts when the polar gates collapsed. So chaos comes pouring through. World is pretty messed. It's like, oh no, we're all going to die. The world will be destroyed. And then the High Elves and the Lizard Men sort of forge together to try and combine their magic energies, and they create the Great Vortex. And Calador himself, along with all the archmages of the High Elves, sort of throws themselves into the Isle of the Dead to try and stop it. And through their channeling of their magic, they're able to sort of hold chaos at bay. But in the process, it's sort of sacrificial. They all get sort of trapped on the Isle of the Dead. So, like, you can't go in there. You can't go to the Isle of the Dead. But Calador and all of the archmages are all ringed around the Isle of the Dead, which is more like a series of beacons than it is an actual island. And within the vortex, you'll find Calador. So
and there he is, still to this day, keeping that vortex afloat.
Frozen in the vortex, channeling magic.
And that's a tough old fate to deal with.
Yeah, it's a bit, I would say it's a little bit worse than death, if you gave me the truth.
A tiny bit, yeah, maybe.
A little bit, but if he wasn't there, like if they freed themselves from the vortex, they would immediately destabilize the vortex and the world would be destroyed.
So would you say that Calador is, because we've said that there's rumours amongst some High Elf warriors who say that Tyrion is this sort of like image of Anarion. Would you say that Calador is kind of the same deal with Teclis?
I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. Like, no one says that Teclis is like Calador reborn in the same way that they say that Tyrion is Anarion reborn. But his skill, his power with magic, being stronger than Malekith, being stronger than perhaps even Nagash, I would say that he is probably Calador reborn. If you were to ask my personal,
non-professional opinion. So we talked about Malekith a little bit. We should talk about how he comes into this. Obviously, this isn't a dark elf lore talk, but he is pretty pivotal to
always a dark elf.
Exactly. So tell me more about that.
I mean, he hails from Nagarath, which is in the northwest of Ulthuan, which is where most of the dark elves sort of hailed from. And he was in line to be Phoenix King, but because he's from Nagarath and because the previous Phoenix King was also from there, and there was some pretty nasty things went on up there, some tortures, some I would say would probably break the Geneva Convention, and things that went on up there. He deferred, and the council said, like, if we choose somebody else, will you be mad? And he said, no, I'll be fine. And then he was the first one to bend the knee to the new Phoenix King, and he went off and did his own thing. He was made pretty high up rank, and he went off exploring and sort of prosecuting the Phoenix King's message across the world. And in his absence, wink, sort of this cult of pleasure, sort of this cult of Slaanesh sort of came and rose amongst the High Elves, and sort of this dens of excess and hedonistic sort of pits and that kind of thing all rose up. And when Malekith came back, he was shocked to see that it was happening, and so he said that he would sort of be sort of like the witch hunter. He would be like the Inquisition, and we'd root out this evil and sort of expel it. So they convened a council to do that, and on the eve of the council, Malekith sort of unveiled the big plot twist: is that the Phoenix King himself was a member of this cult of pleasure, and poisoned him, and so killed him. And then Malekith, in this moment, was like, "I will be Phoenix King," and then.
Obviously, not his decision to make.
No, and so he walked into the fires of Asurian, and he was rejected by the fires, and they burned him, and they sort of scarred him horribly because he was impure, because he was corrupted by the cult of Slaanesh, see, because it was his big plot all along, maybe. And then he managed to sort of escape from the fires. They didn't kill him, and his followers dragged him away, where he sort of hid and seethed. But he wasn't done yet. he's still spurned by the Phoenix, the Phoenix King and the Fires of Assurin. Like we said before, he thought if he can't have it, nobody can. And by it, I mean the whole world.
Yeah.
So he got together with more of the Dark Elves, who were fully corrupted by this point, and said, I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to rip apart the Great Vortex and watch the world fall to pieces, because that's what they deserve for spurning me.
Mm.
And so he tried to do this, and he nearly succeeded, and that's what we call the Sundering. Where it's like he did manage to pull at the vortex with him and his mages sort of cast these dark rituals, and everyone was fighting back against these dark rituals, and he was able to. He was defeated.
Yeah.
Very close to being defeated, but it ripped the land apart. Like Ulthuan sank into the sea, so into the state it sort of is now, and like Nagaroth sort of just split away somewhat, and they got onto these big ships called the Black Arks and sailed away to wherever they could. And
Never to be seen again? Find out in the Dark Elf lore talk. Well, Malekith is a pivotal figure.
It's his fault, essentially.
Yeah, but he's actually quoted in the lore, and this is canon. He said that even he would not claim himself to be a better mage than Teclis.
Mm-hmm.
So
because they went up against each other in battle once, and Teclis emerged victorious. And so Malekith at this point said, I'm never going to fight him again.
Yeah.
So he dutifully avoids Teclis because he knows that he's better than him.
So fast forward to the present day.
Mm-hmm.
We're here in the reign of Finnabar.
We are.
Teclis and Tyrion doing their stuff.
Yeah.
What are going to be the key goals for the High Elves? In the sense of they've got separate starting positions as to all of the legendary lords in Warhammer 2. What are going to be the separation between those two goals when you're playing as Tyrion or you're playing as Teclis?
Tyrion is chiefly concerned with Ulthuan. I mean, it broadens out from that point. Like you find most total war sort of broaden out from a central point to capture and occupy a lot of land. But Tyrion is largely concerned with Ulthuan. It's like, go here, take this, take that, take this, unify the island, and then spread out. Teclis starts in a bit more of an exotic location, a bit further afield than Ulthuan, and his is to explore, still capture, but less defendy, whereas Tyrion is very much, Ulthuan is here to be defended, and Teclis is there to be, what secrets can we uncover? And his is, he's like, what friends can I make? Whereas Tyrion's like, what dudes can I kill? And those are some of the crucial differences I would say between them. It's like a different style of play between the two of them. Very kind of marked difference, I would say.
We've also got a few other gameplay things we can hint at. So if anyone's read, I know in the PC Gamer article they mentioned it separately, the High Elves have this ability where they can spy on those that they're trading with. So for example, if you're in control of Teclis's empire and you start a trade deal with the empire, suddenly you can see everything that the empire has to show. You can see all of their building chains, whether or not you have that fog of war unlocked or not. So that comes into it through this sort of like spying, information gathering history that the High Elves have.
Sort of this intrigue again that we talked about before. Then don't just spy on themselves. They want to spy on other people. They want to know as much as they can. They really enjoy that sort of intrigue, that sort of subterfuge, espionage sort of element to it. And I think it really played really well into the sort of this, imagine this network, if you will, like towards your mid to late game. This network of information where you sort of know things before they happen. So there's a pre-naternal sort of skill at stopping things.
And that's going to be incredibly useful, of course.
I mean, I wish I knew that. Most other Total War games.
Have you had a chance to play much of the High Elves?
Not of the High Elves.
Not the High Elves?
No.
Have you played against them?
A little bit. I've played some Lizard Men. And
do they scare you?
The High Elves? That's an interesting question. Do the High Elves scare me? Probably not as much as the Dark Elves would scare me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that might just be a purely visual thing.
Possibly, yeah.
High Elves don't look so scary.
Yeah.
Dark Elves look scary.
On a visual subject, though, we've got this beautiful architecture that comes with the High Elves as well, and I've been playing a campaign as a race who aren't the High Elves, so I've been attacking a couple of their minor settlements, and some of the gorgeous artwork that's been done for the environments is amazing.
Really? Yeah. like Ulthuan is back in its day. It's like you say, it's literally a utopia, and it's fallen on hard times now, but it's still all there.
Yeah.
Just a bit more empty, undefended, that kind of thing. But the glory of the High Elves is still very much on display.
Is that something that you want to talk about more? The sort of like how Ulthuan was built up to this beautiful sort of.
Well,
like
it's sort of the cradle
glittering
of
city.
civilization. You know, they helped form the world. If you believe what they say, they helped shape civilization. And then at the heart of it, back at Ulthuan, it's here are these glittering towers. Here are these towers with these towns built around the bottom of them. So like testaments to their strength. A bit metaphorical. It's like, look how great we are.
Yeah.
Look at these big towers, shiny silver sort of citadels standing proudly on cliffs looking out across the sea. And it's just everything about the High Elves screams, look at me, look at us, like we are great. And then as it goes older and chaos starts to tinge a bit, it's like, no, really, look at us. Like, we're the
please.
best. Yeah, please look at us.
Actually, no, please. You look at it or I'm going to stab you.
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of, yeah, so, I mean, that's the High Elves in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Is there, before we end, is there anything else that you want to say or that you want to talk about that is your like favourite part of High Elf lore? Or?
I know, we kind of touched on dragons, and the dragons are sort of my deal. I like the dragons a lot. I like a lot of the interplay with the Dark Elves, so that history there, like I told you about Malekith and how he became the Malekith that we know, that's some of my favourite stuff, but like I want to leave some secrets to be discovered.